right, Brett. So glad to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So thanks for doing this in these troubled times.
Absolutely, Ron. It's fantastic to have the chance to chat with you and your audience.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if you know, I'm signed up for the SFG training with you in Italy. Hopefully that still happens, but I've been signed up for a while.
Well, hopefully it does still happen. Obviously, the situation in Italy is pretty intense, and they've got a lot going on. And so one of the well, not not to dive in too deep right off the end. I actually start treatment for cancer on this coming Monday, a week from today,
Gotcha.
and I'll be finishing that treatment in mid-May. But the side effects tend to last for a couple weeks afterwards, so it's doubtful whether I'll be attending the SFG in June. So, but
Gotcha.
if it does happen, Fabio Zonin will be there, and I know Fabio will get you well taken care of.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you. And yeah, thank you for being vulnerable up top and sharing that. Uh,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so as you may know, this is not a fitness podcast per se, but I do often speak about psychology. And a lot of times when guys reach out to me, what can I do for better self-esteem or whatever? First thing I ask is, are you doing strength training? And then after a while, people started asking me, well, what should I do for strength training? I was like, well, I'm not qualified for that, so let me seek out some instruction. And I found StrongFirst and have binge listening to a lot of your podcast appearances and stuff. And just so we all start on the same page, can you explain what maximal strength is and why it's called StrongFirst and why it's so important in the philosophy towards fitness?
Sure. I'll kind of flip the order there. Within StrongFirst, one of our primary principles comes from a Soviet professor, Medvedev, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of the name. But one of his key principles was that strength is the mother quality. It's the forms the foundation for all other physical qualities. So strength is this foundation. Eric Cressy used to refer to it as maximal strength is the glass. And the more strength you have, the bigger the glass, the more physical qualities you can put in the glass. And so we believe that strength forms the foundation for many other, not only physical attributes, but to your point, many personal attributes as well. And being physically strong does I believe, comes with a lot of confidence and a lot of things that help us kind of in our daily lives. And maximal strength itself, you'll run into a lot of definitions on strength and things like that. I believe Zatsiorsky referred to it as the ability to produce force under given conditions. That could be, and that opens the doorways. So it's not just a 1RM deadlift. That could be body weight. That could be, a lot of other things fit into that. So our ability to produce force, either internal or external, against or without, against an external load or without an external load, our ability to produce force.
And as far as definitions go, like, is there any way like that is quantified, or is it just more as a concept? Like I'm thinking like, well, is that for reps or how much you can move? I mean, those seem like such different qualities.
They are, and so but if we stick with the definition that it's your ability to produce force under given conditions, now a repetition pull-up rep max makes sense. That's your ability to produce X number of force over time in that given activity. A 1RM deadlift makes sense because, and by 1RM, that's obviously a weight that you can only lift once. So we take, within StrongFirst, we take a very, I'm going to say a more scientific approach. Intensity is not, I'm going to date myself here, but if you're familiar with the old movie Over the Top, it's an old Stallone movie. If you and your
Unfortunately, no.
audience, if you're not familiar with it, it's a classic '80s Stallone movie. And the character's an arm wrestler, and when he wants to get psyched up for his arm wrestling, he takes his ball cap and he turns it around backwards so the bill's in back, and that's him flipping his switch and turning from nice guy to not nice guy for the purpose of the arm wrestling. So we tend to think of intensity, or intensity has been put out there as this. It's a facial expression. It's a grunt. It's a groan. It's a scream. It's I'm being intense. Intensity from a training standpoint is a percentage of your 1RM or a percentage of your repetition max. That allows us to get way more specific with what we're trying to train and how we're trying to train it.
Gotcha. So just so I understand, strength in the way we're speaking of is based on what you're doing, right? There's no quantity, like absolute quantity when you're talking about maximal strength. Is that right?
Correct, because when you open those doors, I mean, my wife is a former professional dancer, and I've been to quite a few ballet and modern dance performances, and you watch these dance athletes doing these amazing things, producing tremendous leaps and bounds and doing high power activities. That's strength. It doesn't fit some of our personal definitions. You know, I have a history of everything from powerlifting and bending nails and strongman training and doing a bunch of different stuff. So my personal preconceptions on strength would certainly lead me towards that direction. However, the dancer, the 95-pound dancer that's leaping unbelievable leaps. You look at Barishnikov and so many other examples within many different realms. Strength and another central principle within StrongFirst, we believe strength has a greater purpose. That takes us into a lot of different realms. You know, the parent that is working 2 jobs and not putting food on their plate so their kids can eat is living the ideal that strength has a greater purpose.
Gotcha. And you mentioned the red cap thing. I was going to ask you about this much later, but we could jump in. So I know you've bent the red nail. You're very accomplished in strength performance and competition. But I heard you mention some of, like, in passing, your mindset when you go into something like that. And one line I caught you say is you go to a dark place. Can you explain what that means? Because that I thought it was really interesting. I felt like you just went over that whenever I heard you speak about it.
It's almost difficult to explain. I think it's almost back to the Stallone, you know, turning the ball cap around backwards. I'm not somebody that's sniffing, smelling salts and banging my head on stuff and screaming to get psyched up. I'm a little more in the Bruce Banner Hulk line of things, where I'm angry all the time. So, you know, it's easy for me to flip the switch and focus my energies. And in something like bending steel, you are focusing a tremendous amount of tension, effort into that. And really extraneous thoughts go away. The focus becomes on getting in position and producing the force and bending the nail. Pardon me. And in my mind, that just felt like I would go blank and be in a dark place, but it was a dark place with focus, pardon me, and intensity.
So you meant dark in the sense of, like, the lights are not on, not dark like Axe Murderer type thing.
Oh, exactly. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Thanks for catching that.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's the tunnel vision. It's the focus. Everything narrows and directs me to that goal.
And where did that come from in you? Or is that something you're able to train, or is that something that came out through playing sports? Like, because that seems like a very critical skill that maybe a lot of athletes and people don't have.
I've never been asked that question. I'm gonna say it's a combination of an innate ability to focus in strength related things, but then also just in the process of bending nails and really some higher level strength feats. I think it was I'm going to use the term, it was revealable via the training. I think it's something that was there that I could capitalize on via the training. So I don't know if it was so much developed by as it was revealed by the training.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's so interesting because you know, a lot of people speak about focus and the importance of mindset or positive thinking, but when it comes to strength, you're actually looking at different numbers. Like it's actually like either you lifted the weight or not. And I'm curious if you I don't know if this is beyond outside of what you teach or work with, but like how mindset can actually change how much you lift. Like I've heard many hypnotherapists, for instance, talk about strong men becoming weak if they get psyched out, or you know, many of us who played sports have experienced choking at one time or another, which is the opposite. Like, is that anything that ever gets covered in your trainings or StrongFirst, or anything you have any ideas on of how to create greater performance?
I would say one of our authors and a friend and mentor to Pavel is Judd Biasiotto. And I probably just butchered his last name, but you can find his book, Psych, on the StrongFirst website. And he has a career in helping people achieve higher levels of performance and focusing the mind. So that would be a resource that I would point to. It's not something that we necessarily cover. We teach things in the reference of being a strength professional and knowing how to focus your energies towards the more physical displays. So that would be, I think that.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll look it up. I just find it so fascinating because I didn't really think of in these terms when I was an athlete, but certainly in high school wrestling, you can see most of the time at lower levels, the match is decided in the stare down or the handshake, and you know, you see a guy lose his courage and then all his strength goes away. And so like, when I heard you speak about the dark place stuff, I was really fascinated.
Yeah, and I wrestled in high school, junior high and high school, and that was another area where it was just you and your opponent. And so the narrowing of focus and knowing what you had to do was certainly right there in front of you. Whereas, you know, you take a team sport like basketball and, you know, you're running down the court and there's a lot of other variables in play. Probably easier to get distracted from the mental standpoint. If you got distracted on the mat, you typically got pinned.
Yeah.
had a bad day.
Yeah.
So maybe that was something that I carried over with me into the strength practice, and again, that revealable kind of trait of just being able to focus. I mean, the other aspect of some higher level strength feats is it's uncomfortable. Even though we wrap the ends of the nail so that it doesn't go through your hand, it's uncomfortable to bend steel with your hands. And so there's an aspect of ignoring a painful or uncomfortable situation in order to accomplish the goal that gets involved in some strength feats that perhaps may not get involved in other very high level athletic feats, and just some differences.
Because I imagine, I mean, there's it's a natural nail, right? It's a pointy end and a head. Gotcha.
Well, there's those, and then there's the actual red nail, which is more a piece of cold rolled steel. So it's not a traditional nail, but it is a cold rolled steel rod, 7 inches in length, 5/16 inch thickness, and it's fun.
Gotcha.
Haven't done it in a while.
How did you get into? Did you go from sports into strength training? Like, how did that fascination start, or how did you get into this line of work?
I had a tremendous example from my dad. We're having a thunderstorm, so if you hear some thunder in the background, that's what's going on.
No worries.
I had a great example from my dad, probably 40 some odd years ago now. He had quit smoking, gained some weight, decided to go to the gym and start training. And he was always kind of a strong guy, but he'd gotten heavier as a result of quitting smoking. And I just saw him get up every day at 4:45, go to the gym, do his workout. When I was wrestling, I would go with him. So I had a great example from my family, from my dad, and then being in wrestling, that got me started. I was always a little bit of a strong kid. I was good at pull-ups. Um, and then I went to college and I was an athletic trainer, and I did nothing pretty much for about 4 years, almost 6 years, and because grad school as well. And then I kind of returned to training as I returned from athletic training to the fitness industry.
Gotcha. And you got into kettlebells and that style of training a couple years into your professional career. Is that right?
A couple more years down the road,
Okay.
but so I would have taken my first job in '95. So let me think. 95 to 97. I was at Military Academy of Virginia as an athletic trainer, and then ran a hospital fitness center from 97 to 2002. And it was during that time that I became aware of Pavel. Somebody that had worked for me brought in, told me, hey, you need to check this guy out. And I got power to the people, and actually started deadlifting and doing some things. And then, of course, they started producing kettlebells and the original Russian Kettlebell Challenge book, which, true story, I got it, I read it, and I put it in the desk drawer. I'm like, I can do all that with a dumbbell, blah, 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 blah. I put it away, but it was always gnawing at the back of my head. And so I eventually, a couple months later, I pulled it back out. I hooked up a dumbbell with about 50 pounds and tried one of the snatch workouts that was in the book. And when EMS revived me, I decided I should probably, that's a joke, by the way. EMS did not have to revive me from my snatch workout.
Gotcha.
But, I decided I should probably get some training in this, and attended his second ever workshop in February of 2002. And then started teaching with Pavel in April of 2003.
Your pre-Pavel training or philosophy, was it, because I know that, I mean, take typical American bodybuilding culture, like what most people know about training till failure, 3 sets of 8 reps or whatever. That's what I grew up in high school hearing from everyone. It's very counter to a lot of the StrongFirst principles. Was that like a clash, like a internal culture clash when you started training that way, or were you already kind of in that mode?
Kind of already in that mode. And I mean, over the years, 25 plus years of doing this, I've been every guy. I'm an air quotes guy. So if your audience isn't looking at the video, then they can picture me doing air quotes around this. I've been every guy that you can be. I've been a 1 set to failure hit Jedi. I've been the body weight guy, the functional training guy. I've been every version of trainer that you can be, I think. And it really, I remember it. This was 98, 99. I was at one of the first Perform Better, Learn by Doing seminars. And Juan Carlos Santana and Diane Vivas were up on stage. And I was at this time a 1 set to failure hit Jedi. And Juan Carlos gets up there and he says, okay, muscles are dumb. They only do what the neurological system tells them to do. And I'm sitting in the audience like, yeah, but, oh man, because he's right. And when you look at a lot of the bodybuilding or 1 set to failure, and a lot of these things are after maximum stimulation of the muscle fiber to encourage growth. That's, again, even if you're able to do that, it comes back to the ability of the neurological system to guide the body towards that point. And you're saying that that's the most important thing in training, and it's not. Even towards muscular growth, it's maximum stimulation of the fiber is not the holy grail as far as that's concerned. So that was kind of this turning point. And I grew up on Arnold's Education of a Bodybuilder. Like I'm very familiar with the old bodybuilding methods and Arnold and everything. And Franco, rest his soul, who just passed in the last year. And then, moving past that point where I kind of returned to good body weight training, I was working on my deadlift, power to the people, things of that nature. So there was that turning point where I was headed down what I would consider a not great overall path, and then made a nice turn.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean by the neural training? I mean, because I've read it so many times, I honestly don't get it. Like, I understand how a muscle breaks down or regrows, but can you explain, like, when you're training your nervous system, what does that actually mean?
Well, everything we do targets the nervous system in some fashion. Like, you can't say that you're training and not have the neural aspect involved. And so when you try to reduce it down to what's happening microscopically at the muscle fiber being the most important thing, you're missing the idea that the message to even do anything at the muscle fiber level has to come from the neurological system. So everything we do is neurologically based. Even those people that are training to failure and focused on the muscle fiber, neurological system still leading the charge. So when you step back and you look more from a neurological perspective, what you start to realize is the body functions in patterns. So it doesn't think bicep. You've asked a question, I want to pick this weight up. The answer is a bicep curl. Just depending on what the question you asked is the response. The body gets a solution, the brain forms a solution for that. So it doesn't think bicep. It thinks move this from point A to point B, whatever the goal was. And so there's a pattern that is generated to make that thing happen. And we can draw that out to almost any activity. And yes, there's aspects of movement variability, and the conversation can get very muddy if you go down the motor learning rabbit holes and movement variability rabbit holes. But so that pattern we want to, and if we look at this more from a pure strength perspective, so I'm going to separate the conversation into more of a pure strength conversation versus a growth or size conversation. From the pure strength perspective, I want to be a Formula One race car driver when it comes to my kettlebell press, when it comes to my swing, when it comes to I want to have that high a level of precision and patterning involved in my swing, in my kettlebell press, in my bench press. So to get good at it, to recruit in the right pattern, shifting muscle groups at the right time. There's all these things that are happening from a patterning standpoint that have to do with how you're neurologically training or neurologically patterning that skill. And training to failure can literally be training to fail. You'll have a hard time finding a power lifter, an Olympic lifter, strongman competitor. They may train to failure at different phases with different specific exercises, but you're not going to find that as a main training tool within those folks who are interested in really max strength. Now, for the growth conversation, our take on it is you just need more volume. So it's not training to failure. It's accumulating a larger degree of volume without training to failure. And if you eat and you stimulate, you will grow. And so, and there's many roads to Rome. You can go find many successful examples of folks that trained to failure and got very big and were bodybuilders and did X, Y, and Z. But you're going to find on the strength end of things, definitely training to failure, encouraging kind of a less than optimal neurological pattern. I think we can do better.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I wish I knew earlier, but like when I was in high school, I wrestled and I boxed, and every young boxer is trying to increase his punching power. So I would do tons of bench presses and lots of chest stuff, and then lat stuff, and then tricep stuff. And everyone would say like, oh yeah, weightlifting, actually, it doesn't affect your punching power, it makes it weaker and stuff. And I just thought that was, I don't know, I didn't really think much of it until only very recently did I do a one-handed kettlebell swing for the first time, and realizing that like just the moment where you have to shift the direction of the bell is exactly what a punch is. Like everything fires together. It's like, oh, this is what I should have been doing a long time ago. But I guess you just learn things when you learn things.
Well, and it's always the mix. I mean, if you look at, and of course, a lot of what I draw from is things I've learned from Pavel. And when you research like Russian boxing, they work on various pressing and versions of bench press activities to a pretty high strength level. But it's in combination with. I think that's one of the differences is we tend to I don't know, it's U.S. culture, I guess, a little bit all or nothing sort of mindset, and a little bit of strength there applied in the right way becomes better boxing. It's not that a high bench press is going to make you a good boxer. You
Right.
bench press to increase the strength and aspects of the pattern. You must then learn to apply it in the right fashion. And to your point, there are drills like kettlebell snatches, kettlebell swings that have what we have come over the years to term the what the heck effect. That all I'm doing is swinging and snatching, but my pull-ups went up. Like I haven't even been training my pull-ups, but I'm able to do, I just set a new rep max on my pull-ups, or I pressed a heavier bell because I was snatching. Or so we have this generalized kind of what the heck effect, and exercises that seem to have greater carryover from a narrow specificity.
Yeah, and with just curious about the swings specifically, because you have to change direction the way it's done. Is most of the work happening just like from? Because I notice when I do a swing with a heavy bell, it's more like my body's trying to just not let my arm fly out. It's not the concentric movement where I feel like I'm doing the most work. It's actually just like resisting or maybe normal force. Is that accurate, or is it just in my head?
Well, there's several things going on there, and so if we look at the swing as a projection of force, so you're producing power via a hip hinge, very similar to a vertical leap or a broad jump, but you're not leaving the ground, and you're accelerating a weight, which then weighs much more than it used to because you're accelerating it, and or has more force than the weight, and that gets into physics. I'm not
centripetal force, something like that.
Yeah, we're not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But now it's trying to pull you forward, and you have to root and not get pulled off your base. And so, yeah, there's different qualities being trained. And I think one of the most unique things with the kettlebell swing is when you reverse gears and you have this unique loaded eccentric position. I've been on a force plate two-handed swing with a 24 kilo bell producing over 3 times body weight eccentric load. That's a nice return on investment for that weight. And so, yeah, there's a few different things happening there. There's of course the concentric, you're producing power, but then you have to control that power and not let it pull you off base. So there's rooting and wedging and some things that get involved. But then you have this great overspeed, loaded eccentric that really, I think, is one of the reasons for this what the heck effect that we talk about.
I want to go back to something actually at the beginning we were speaking about the different types of strength. And is there a trade-off? Because you see people speak about this, especially in combat sports, like he's a great, he has one punch power, but then he gasses out. Like that seems to be the case, like between athletes. And is that actually the case, or is it just people focus on different things, or like what is the deal with that? Is it possible to be 10 out of 10 across the board? Is what I'm asking, I guess.
I don't think so. I think even if you look at some of the greatest athletes in the world, the decathletes of the Olympics, who participate in the 10 different events, and they're going to be really good at a couple of those events. And then if you look at them compared to the rest of the Olympic field in those specific events, they're okay. Yeah, they're still an Olympic level athlete. I mean, regardless of where they are, but the specialist in that field is going to far outpace them for that specific event. But they're going to be really good at 2 to 3 events. Going to be okay at a bunch of the other events. Probably going to have one that's a weak link that they're just trying to not finish last in. And we're going back to the this is really going to date me. The Dan and Dave era in the 80s. Anyway, you have to look that up. The Nike and made a big deal out of it. Anyway, so if we look at it from that perspective, even these very highly trained Olympic athletes can't be the best at everything. So you do have people, like even for myself in upper body, in reference to upper body, I can be very strong, but I have very low endurance. I've never been able to do a lot of upper body work, but I can be very strong in my upper body work. And I'm able to operate at a very high percentage of my 1RM. So I could knock off, sets of, 3 to 5 reps at 90 some odd pounds, but my 1RM was a 106, 100, I think I did a little bit more than that. I might have knocked out 110 or so pound pull up at some point. But so I was able to operate a very high percentage of my 1RM, but endurance wise wasn't all that great. But when I could have a pull up over 100, I was able to do 10 reps at 70. And so that high level of strength allowed me to do more at a lower, that's 70%, which you'd expect to be roughly a 10 RM. 8 to 10 RM. So I think you do have people that they're going to be more fast twitch, high power, but not have great endurance. This is one of the things that Pavel's trying to work on with the strong endurance protocols, where you're doing high power work on this repeated sprint interval sort of mindset with these cycles that are built in, series that are built into the training sessions. And now we're trying to get this ability to have this high power output on a repeated basis, which would probably be a benefit to fighters and grapplers.
Gotcha. And the idea behind that is like the lactic acid prevention. Is that right?
It's so not really
just one
prevention,
aspect?
because
Okay.
you can't prevent it. And I would say training has taken 2 different routes with this concept of lactic acid. And to be clear, lactate is an energy source in the body. Super cool. Your body loves it. The acid that comes along with it, however, can be that is the problem. That's the aspect of lactic acid that causes the problem. The lactate, super cool. Body handles it really well. The acid needs to be dealt with. And so training protocols have basically focused in 2 areas: tolerance, how much of the burn can you take? Capacity, can we train you to be able to clear that acid in a more efficient manner so that your capacity to handle the acid is better? The strong endurance protocols go in the direction of capacity, not tolerance. So that's probably the best way to describe that.
Gotcha. All right. So on that note, I'll reveal something. I've been training for the SFG requirements. First time I looked at it, I was like, oh, this must be a piece of cake. I've been snatching for a while. I've been doing the quick and dead protocol for a while. I can snatch a much heavier bell for a couple reps than my test weight. So it's like, I didn't even bother testing. I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this quick and the dead thing, and I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe like 10 weeks into training with the kettlebell, I tested myself and I did terribly. Like I think I stayed on pace only up into the 50 reps, and then I was like shot. Like I might have gotten another 10 reps out. I'm sure the answer to that is more volume and more training, but in terms of let's say hitting that 100 reps in 5 minutes as soon as possible, is it better to train with shorter rest periods to like get used to the burn, or get used? I was just wondering, is it a lack of endurance? Like, what's the deal there?
So it's for a glycolytic event like the snatch test, and there's no way around it. You're knocking out 100 reps in 5 minutes. It's a glycolytic event, period. So in your training, where that would take you is and it varies on the individual, but typically within a 2 to 4 week time frame, you can do what's known as a glycolytic peak and be ready for that event and not suffer quite so much. If you've read Simple and Sinister, Pavel's book Simple and Sinister, okay, he has a 2nd edition out revised and updated Simple and Sinister. And in there, he talks about this concept of timeless training. And this was something that I had held myself to the clock for close to 17 years. Like I had a weird relationship with my clock because I just wanted to do everything by the clock, X number of rest, X amount of work, blah, 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 blah. So the concept in timeless is you start the clock and do your first set. So let's say the snatch test is 10 sets of 10, right? So you're going to do, and that's 5 sets on each arm, and you need to do that in 5 minutes. So you're going to start the clock and do your first set of 10, and you're going to ignore the clock. When you can pass the talk test, you continue to your next set.
And that's
so your goal.
I've caught my breath enough that I can have a conversation.
Exactly. Okay. You want to be able to do something like, the Pledge of Allegiance or some other sing Happy Birthday or, whatever,
Gotcha.
Whatever the case may be. And so when you can pass the talk test, next set. And then once you've got your 10 sets done, record your total time. And you just do that over a course of training sessions, over a course of weeks. And what you'll see is the overall trend will be down towards the goal. And it's actually a more painless way to get to the snatch test. I was using it in terms of training for the Simple and Sinister goal, the Sinister goal with the 48 kilo. And the first time I did the timeless with 10 sets of 10 with the 48, it took me like 23 minutes. I was obviously being pretty generous with my rest, but the next time was like 21, 19,
Gotcha.
17. I think I made it down to like 15, and then I went on a trip to teach, and I was back up to 19, and then it was 17, and then it was a great way to train. It's honoring kind of this anti-glycolytic mindset. It's getting you there where you're simply just able to do more in less time without the pain and the burn that you're talking about. So where I would take your snatch test training right now is I would say, let's go timeless. Let's grab the 24.
Gotcha.
Let's do 10. When you can pass the talk test, do another 10. And when you've got your 10 sets done, record your time.
Cool.
Now, another metric that I've thrown in is to record my halfway time. So I'll get I get that 5th set done and record how much time it took to get halfway. And the reason I do that is if halfway took me X, but finishing takes me Y, and it's a lot more than just doubling the first number, I push too hard during the first 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
During the first half. So it's a way for me to gauge if I'm actually honoring that talk test in the first 5 minutes, or if there's something else happening.
Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. So I probably could have done a little better if I didn't force those first 5 minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
and then from like a strategy standpoint, one of the things that we run into is when you switch mindset from training to testing, you tend to start sprinting. And I don't care how in shape you are, go run up a flight of stairs. What happens when you get to the top?
Right. You're out of breath.
You huff and puff, right? So when you shift into testing and you tend to go into a little more of a sprint, yeah, you're going to gas out. The pacing is a little too fast. The breath gets off. There is this, like I said, there is this difference in energy system and glycolysis that kicks in.
Cool. I want to ask you about those in a second, but I do want to speak on programming because, one for me, for instance, if I'm training for the snatch test, would it be good to just do this timeless like snatch? Should that just be my primary workout, or is it beneficial to mix other things in? Because like as I've looked at the StrongFirst different protocols, I was looking at Naked Warrior. I was doing that for a while before I had a kettlebell, and then there's so many things that seem cool and interesting. I don't know how to fit it in into a month or a week. So
it's the decision making, and you're coming down into the home stretch. I would say you're within the last 2 to 3 months prior to the hopefully the SFG1 still being held in Italy. So it is time to focus. It's time to not get distracted into some of these other activities. So I'm going to table that for just a minute, and then we'll talk a little more specifically as far as the kettlebell and getting ready for the level 1.
Okay.
I do have my level 1 prep program that's been out for a long time, available on the StrongFirst website. And what you'll see there is I put together 3 training days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's a variety of circuits and snatch work. And the reason I did that is there are a lot of people out there who are not used to training 3 days in a row. And so you go to the SFG level 1, and you're going to be asked to do a lot in 3 days. In particular, the first 2 days, but third day's no picnic either, because you've got the technique testing, practice, snatch test, and the grad practice session. So a lot that happens on Sunday as well. So it's a big weekend, and you need to know what it feels like to have to train 3 days in a row. And so I put the workout together like that. Monday's a rest day. Tuesday and Wednesday are training days. A little more specific for the snatch test and building up some conditioning for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Thursday's a day off. And that was put together specifically because of the nature of the event. I think for your training, you need a heavy swing day in there. Because if all you're doing is moving a 24 is going to start to feel heavy again. And you don't want that for your snatch test. That snatch test weight cannot feel heavy. Because the idea of stepping up and doing 100 reps of something that feels heavy, that's not fun. So we want to, you should be one arm swinging at least the 32 for a very similar set rep protocol as you are the 24 for your snatches.
Gotcha.
So I think that will have benefit and carryover. So, yeah, I would have a 1 or 2 timeless days. I'd have a heavy swing day, and I would have a couple of those circuit days in there to work on training X number of days in a row. And then you'll see I have it's almost a glycolytic peak that's built in to the snatch test protocol, where it's Ethan Reeve years ago coined the term density training. And what he would do is take a goal, double it, and then start knocking that off in kind of a per minute protocol, but then keep increasing the reps and compressing the workload. So you stayed at the same total volume, but you kept accomplishing that volume in shorter periods of time, increasing density. And so I think you could run 4 to 5 week sort of ramp up on that density training protocol as you head into the event, and feel very confident with your snatch test. Because you're like, I have people that get down to, they'll do timeless, basically passing the talk test between sets of 10 snatches. They're knocking off a snatch test in 6.5 minutes. Well, the journey to 5 minutes is pretty, like, that's a jump you can make. And that's timeless. Like, you're passing the talk test in between sets. So it's definitely a more painless way to get there.
Gotcha. And for anyone else, though, let's say who isn't looking at SFG requirements, how do you suggest programming with like the barbell stuff versus body weight stuff? And you've been every kind of guy. Is there any way you suggest someone for overall fitness or general strength?
Yeah, I think it obviously depends on what tools and modalities you would like to work on. In essence, from a general standpoint, I'm going to say everything can be done. It just depends on what you want the main focus to be. And then if you're going to try to do several things, understand you're going to be doing a little bit of each of those things. Nobody specializes in the 100-meter and the marathon. Like, you don't get to do that. You got to pick and choose. So from very basic standpoint, you're going to pick 1 to 3 strength exercises. You'll work on those from 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps protocol. One of my favorite ways to progress is take like 5x3, 5 sets of 3, work with that weight until you can do 5x5, then increase the weight and go back to 5 sets of 3. I've been giving people that for years. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. There's no complicated math involved. It's just put the work in over time and you get stronger. And so pick 1 to 3 strength exercises that you'd like to be better at. A deadlift, a press, and a pull are not bad choices. If you're swap out or do a squat, or there's lots of options within that. I love keeping the get up in there as a way to check in with right and left sides to maintain mobile, stable shoulder, tied upper and lower body together. I like having the get up in there as a way to finish any movement prep or warm up that I'm doing prior to the strength work, and then some form of conditioning. I like swinging and snatching a kettlebell. Some people are going to want to run hill sprints. So there's lots of different options there. It could be the the air assault bike now. Or rowers. I mean, there's tons of different things that you could do for that conditioning aspect. The one thing I would put in people's heads or get them thinking about is, and I've been saying this for a little while now, rest is the most abused training variable out there. We think it needs to burn, it needs to suck. We want to reach that point where we can't do anymore. And certainly from time to time, actually very infrequently, yes, you want to find out where that edge is so that you can better gauge, where the rest of the intensity and everything. But from a general standpoint, people don't rest enough. Whether that's between strength exercises, where your rest should be towards of 3 to 5 minutes. Now that doesn't mean you do a set of deadlifts and you just do nothing until 5 minutes has passed, although that's an option. I mean, when I was powerlifting and I was squatting heavy, I loved to go in the gym, do my prep. I'd knock off my first work set for my squats, and I'd go walk around the gym for 5 to 7 minutes, social butterfly. Mm-hmm. And then I would come back and do my next set and rest again for 5 to 7 minutes. And people struggle with that. They struggle with rest. It's okay to rest, because what's everybody concerned about right now? How am I going to recover from my training? We have this entire cottage industry of recovery strategies that's cropped up here. And it's all, in my opinion, it's basically all based on bad programming, where you're not resting enough, and lifestyle issues. If you're sleeping 4 hours a night and working 2 jobs and wondering why you're not recovering from your training, I don't think it's your training. I think there's some other things we need to work on there.
What do you think about training while sore?
I'm going to say it depends.
Okay.
And this is where we talk about the concept of waviness. If you've trained hard enough to get sore, or you've done something, let's separate the conversation. If you've done something new or different and you get sore, it's usually because you did something new or different. If you take your programming, you just have a day where you're like, I'm going to do 1,000 reps, and you get sore, those are 2 different sores, right? Mm-hmm. One is from overload, too much work. One is because you did something new. Because we can all have that experience. You don't squat for, a year, and then you crawl back underneath the bar. It's a really uncomfortable 3 to 5 days, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're struggling to get down to the toilet and everything else. So something new sore, overload sore. Now, the solution is somewhat similar. You need to do something. You need to encourage the blood flow. You need to encourage the body moving the waste products and the gunk, very scientific term, out of the body, right? So you need to do something, but it needs to be way less than the thing that got you sore. So yeah, we want to do something. We want to train and try to move the body and help with that soreness, but it needs to be something of low intensity, but increasing that blood flow so that you recover better from the soreness.
Gotcha. And I know you've trained athletes. Do you how do you modify training knowing that they're going to have wrestling practice or something like that? Like, do you just decrease the volume, or is there something else you do with your programming?
It's yeah, I mean, it's really, hopefully there's a conversation with the coach to say athlete Susie needs to be better at X. This is the weak link in her performance. So then from a training standpoint, I can take that information and go, okay, this is how we're going to target that. To your point of a grappler that might, maybe Susie is an MMA fighter and she gasses out towards the end of her rounds. That's information that I can take and start building a protocol that's going to help with that. This will sound like a unrelated topic, but bear with me. Because when you work with volleyball players and basketball players, the concern, jumping is a skill that they need to be good at. But you have to think about how many times they're jumping during their practice and during their competition. Now you start training jumping in your programming, you will overload that athlete and you'll probably not do them any favors. But some good low rep strength work might just give them the ability to produce more force in their jumping, which they're already practicing for hundreds of reps in competition and in practice. And so it's understanding the activity and knowing that there's certain things that you're actually not going to train because they're doing enough of it. they're, like I said, the volleyball player, the basketball player, little athlete Susie, if she's a basketball player, she's jumping a lot. If she's a volleyball player, she's jumping a lot. What I want to do is support that jumping with quality movement, make sure the ankles are mobile, make sure her strength base is good, and an exercise like the kettlebell swing, where we develop quick hips, powerful hips with that good eccentric load, and some single leg training, which will transfer over to the goal activity. And then, yeah, the volume is going to be somewhat compressed. You can get a little out of a lot, or a lot out of a little. Sorry, I flipped that. You can get a lot out of a little.
Gotcha. We skipped over it. I did want to speak about it a little bit. I think it's another one of these things that are not easy to understand. It's like you mentioned the glycolytic system, and can you explain like the different energy systems and how that relates to strength training?
Sure. So broad strokes here, and keeping things, I'm going to say simple. There's three main energy systems that the body operates off of. There's this alactic, or sometimes termed anaerobic sort of energy. That's a very quick, short burst. Usually within 10 to 20 seconds, you're done with that energy system. But that energy system is turning over and trying to get back up running. There's a middle system called the glycolytic system, which is kind of this almost, look at it as an emergency system that exists as a bridge to the aerobic system. And if we look at this, the alactic system is this energy that is set, ready to go should you need it. It doesn't turn over all that quickly on its own to replace what's burned. We have the aerobic system. This is very efficient. This is why we can go run a marathon, and we can do an activity for 2 and 3 hours continuously, because our body hits this aerobic state, hopefully, where we're cranking over and producing energy in a very efficient manner. The middle system, and understand that all three of these systems are always running. So even if you're alactic, there's 1 or 2% that's aerobic, and there's a small percent of glycolytic. So we separate them because the dominance of work in that first 5 to 10 seconds is going to be this alactic system. The dominant system, once you get past about, it varies on the individual, but let's say you get past 3 minutes, you're primarily aerobic with what you're doing. So what happens in the glycolytic system is it's the least efficient energy system. It produces the most waste or byproducts. So that acid that we need to clear, a lot of that happens within that glycolytic energy reaction. And so the concept in training is do high power repeats where you get a little bit of acid, but not much, because it's hard to build capacity to clear acid if you're not producing acid. So you work hard enough in these repeat sprint intervals in these series that Pavel has put together to where you clear the acid, but you do it efficiently, so you're never getting overloaded where you clog the mechanisms and suffer some of the consequences of not clearing the acid well.
And is that the idea behind like the 30-second? So I think we might have a delay, but a 30-second rep. Sorry, 30-second set. I've heard that from people like looking for hypertrophy. They say 30 to 40 seconds is the sweet spot. Is that accurate?
For hypertrophy, because we do need a little bit of that that glycolytic kind of that stress to be produced. Yes. What you see from a power perspective is past 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds, you have a 50% drop off in power. Whether you want to have it or not, whether you think you're still being super powerful or not, you have a tremendous drop off in power past 15 to 20 seconds.
Gotcha. I think we have internet's breaking down a little bit, but I just have two last questions for you. We're coming to the end of the hour. I just want to ask you on mobility, because I know you work with FMS, and I'll jump to my specific question around mobility, which is I only learned about the fascial systems recently, and along with the Quick and the Dead, I've been doing like these fascial elongation, basically yoga programs focused on fascia. I don't know if it's in my head or not, but it seems that after I stretch my fascia in this way, my force output is greater, or my strength is better. Is there something to do with fascia and strength, or is that maybe in my head, or is it just simply range of motion?
Oh boy, we may have to schedule another podcast. So the fascial system being this connective tissue suit that we all wear, that does have a lot to do with force transmission through the body, but it's one of those things that's always been with us. Like, fascia isn't new. We didn't just add it to the system. We simply understand it better. So what that tells me is more than likely, because actually pre-contracted muscle, or a muscle that doesn't have its full range of motion, or a pattern that doesn't have its full range of motion, can never be as strong as a muscle that does, or a pattern that does have its full range of motion. So more than likely, as a result of the stretching and things that you're doing, you're simply opening up, allowing a full range within that pattern, which is allowing you to have better strength and power within that.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I'll maybe send you some other questions on movement some other time, but I did want to close with this, because I heard you speak about stoicism in one of your podcasts, and this maybe could also be its own thing, but I was curious if you had any philosophy bits that you apply to strength training, because I know you look at strength as way more than just lifting iron or moving weight. Is there anything anything that you take philosophically to your training and that maybe we can share and end with?
Well, I think one of the Stoic concepts is memento mori. Remember, you will die, and that's not meant to be negative. That is meant to remind you to live every moment. And part of being able to live every moment is having this physical base that allows you to go do the things you want to do. You don't want to have help to accomplish some of these basic things in life, and you don't want to be restricted in some of these things that you would like to go do in order to live each moment. You don't want to be restricted by this idea. And there's people that end up in different medical and physical situations where they do have to operate differently in their lives. But so if I want to live every moment, I need to be physically ready to live every moment. And part of that is having this base of physical strength and I'll use the term conditioning that allows me to pick up and go and do what I want to do. If my wife were to say, let's go on a hike, I want to know that I can throw my boots on and go for a hike and enjoy the day, not survive the day. And so that strength having a greater purpose is to allow me to handle the emergencies and things in life that may arise, to enjoy life and do the best I can for myself and my family.
Awesome. That's great. I love that. Yeah, thanks so much, Brett. This has been really great. I hope we get to speak again at some point.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. I know there were probably some halts in the internet. The internet is being tested as never before with global lockdowns and people streaming Netflix and everything else. So really appreciate you making time and having me on the podcast, and wishing everyone the best through these challenging times.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome.